Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to another episode of Insight. Insight is a program designed to invite some of the great creative minds of the day who will give us information and insightful information as it relates to things in the community, the world, this nation that we live in. Before we bring in our guests, I want to first say that we will not be on the 29th of December, but we will resume on the 5th of January. Sister Nikki Lucas, who ran for city council, will be our guest. And then, of course, I want to thank the staff, which has really been very helpful. I want to thank the Reverend Derek Jackson. Certainly, I want to thank Deacon Linda Atkinson Kendall, who's also serves as my administrative assistant. I want to thank Deaconess Asia Camp Jackson and Niger Elizabeth Camp. I want to thank them for being that, because you can't really do any sort of programming unless you have great people around you that will help and assist you in many ways. So I wish to express my thanks to them. Now, my guest tonight, I'm glad to have her back on there. This is the second time, actually the second guest who has been on the second time. Dr. Jennifer Jones Austin Esquire. And there are so many things that I wish to talk to her about. And I want her to know that we're going to talk. And if we go a couple of minutes, I don't want her to feel rushed, because there are so many things that took place in the news these last 24 hours. I'll probably add that to the conversation as well. So Dr. Jones, it's good to have you once again.
It's good to be here. It's really good to be with you. I had such a great time the last time. So when you invited me to come again, I said, of course, of course. And I may look a little like weary-eyed. I literally landed at LaGuardia at about 6:40.
Really?
Just got in here like about 10 minutes ago. So.
But whatever you have in the cup, you deserve to have it to kind of relax you down and bring it.
I'm having some Earl Grey, so a little bit of caffeine in here with some, I do deserve the half and half.
Yeah, okay, very good, very good. Now, there's so many things in the news, and we're going to get, of course, to the book, the revised book of God in the Ghetto. We want to get to that. I want to first congratulate you on your graduation of Alliance Theological Seminary. I want to get into that. Oh yeah, we got pictures. The only thing I don't have is videos of you dancing. And,
and you know I like to dance.
Yeah, I know you do. Listen, we're trying to upgrade our game here at Insight. So we want to make sure that as we're presenting this, we would also show pictures to the audience and graduation. I mean, this is you as what they say, you is a real doctor. Dr. Jennifer Jones Austin Esquire.
This was a blessing. This was a true blessing. Oh, yeah, God.
And there you are. Let me ask you a question. I got to ask you a question. How did it feel being there at Bethany, where, of course, our friend Adolphus Lacey serves, and where your father served for many years? What was that moment like for you?
It was indescribable in some respects. So the ceremony would have taken place and actually in Westchester during the May commencement, but it was determined. Are you with me?
Oh yeah, I'm with you.
Oh, I looked like I lost you for a second on my end. But it was determined that the president didn't want to wait that long and said, why don't we come on in over to Bethany and do it at Bethany with you? And so they came on over to Bethany, and the place, like the podium where we were, that was the podium where I stood at age 7 and recited the Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream speech, the excerpt that is always recited. And my father put me over there and put me up on some blocks and had me read it. And so I recited. And so then to be there literally like 47 years later in that same place, being hooded, to know that it was because of my father and his ministry, that I first came to know what it means to be leading and serving in the spirit of God, the revolutionary, what it means to speak truth to power, as my dad would say, to say no to a lie, to veto an untruth, to come full circle and, to be receiving that honor and that distinction in that space for the work that I do, the work in the space of justice and theology and the intersection. Indescribable.
I imagine that it probably was, because that's what I really wanted to ask you, was how was that feeling? And
Did
you
you see the joy on my face? People said to me they hadn't seen me like so giddy in like so long. I was, what do they say? A pig in mud.
A pig in mud. How is your mom doing? She's such a gracious lady.
Mom is doing all right. She's managed well through COVID. 82 years young. She tells everybody she's in her 83rd year, and she's a blessing, and she's holding.
Very good.
God has been good.
Now, let me ask you this. Now, this constant, in your opinion, this constant coverage of Donald Trump, it's so inundated in the news every day, which seems like the last couple of weeks, just like basically 24 hours a day when you look at the 24-hour news network. What is your thoughts on that?
Very similar to my thoughts back in 2015 and 2016, that the media gave him way too much free airspace, and that was what helped to catapult him into, a position of leadership in the Republican Party, and then ultimately to the presidency. And that we are now once again in in that situation where they are again giving him way too much play. Now, the way that they try to spin it is, like how, like, I don't know if you saw the piece about the rally that he was holding that wasn't well attended.
Yes.
They try to spin it like they're speaking, like, like they're calling out the things that he would not like, but you're still giving him free airtime.
Absolutely.
And I think that's damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And to think that one of those who spin it so much was Fox, and Chris Wallace is leaving that after 18 years looking for something to do. So that's interesting within itself.
You know what they say. Reverend. You know very well what they say. Like when you start worrying about whether or not your numbers coming up as you mature, right? You got. That's a little bit of like his way of repenting, probably. Maybe I shouldn't have gone that far, but yeah. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. Listen, that's fair. Now, what are your thoughts on the recent O.J. Simpson early parole? Did you know about that?
Let me just say, on the whole, I was in law school when O.J. was on trial, and the trial for the murders. I guess was that back in 1991, maybe? Was it 91, 92?
That was 90. Yeah, about that.
Maybe he committed or allegedly committed the crime in 91, and he was on trial in 92, perhaps. What I remember most was, one, being in law school, how everybody under the sun, I should say, was asking me questions about whether O.J. was innocent or guilty. It was as though like 2 years of law school made me qualified to determine whether he was guilty or not. What I also remember, and I can't help but remember this because it's still a constant occurrence, is that anything that is inexcusable, inexplicable, in the criminal justice system, and that isn't right, OJ's name always somehow pops up in the middle of it. Yeah, everything's an OJ when it's not right. And so honestly, because that's how I feel, the early parole, it's like I don't really know like how to feel about it. Because I think that he has been used, especially by white America, as an example of the one that got away. And I don't know what to make of that or how to think about that. Like, am I angry about that? Do I agree with that? Like, going back to the murder and the acquittal. He has been made the example and the analogy every time the system isn't functioning properly, according to white America, and especially concerning Black people, right? And so I guess I don't get too caught up in it because it makes me, that aspect makes me angry.
Yeah. With that, there is so much going on as it relates to these paroles, because even Sirhan was released as well. I mean, the accused assassin of Robert F. Kennedy, and he was sentenced in 1969, and of course he's free. And not to mention, Dr. Jones, the recent 150,000 documents of the John F. Kennedy assassination has been released, which doesn't benefit the public, because anybody who's involved in that is probably dead, or hiding out like Charlie Chaplin used to do. But the thing is that with all of these things taking place concurrently in our world, and not to mention what happened recently, of course, your roots and your parents' roots in Kentucky. And how did what was your response to that as relates to that such a trip? And I want to say this, I recently called the Reverend Rodney McFarland, who used to pastor the Mount Olive Baptist Church in Brooklyn, and of course, who went to Bracktown, Kentucky. And he said he's 3 hours away from it. But what's your thoughts on that tragedy that took place?
New Yorkers are so, this is not a good thing. It just is what it is. We become, I don't want to say we're used to, but we hear and experience crisis of different types on a regular. And so it's kind of like we are, we're not always as shocked and thrown. There are things that throw us. I mean, COVID hit us hard, and I think we all were like, what the heck is this? But we found a way to get through it. We rebounded, we lost so many loved ones and then, but we kept persevering. That's kind of what New Yorkers do. My concern when I saw what happened in Kentucky is that these communities don't have these things that jolt them like on a regular. And so the trauma that will attend and endure will probably be of a different type. I mean, that post-traumatic stress probably in some ways may be analogous to what happened on 9/11.
Yeah.
Where, it took many of us a while to feel okay, kind of getting back out there. And you still live with that reminder. You still live with it. And so I think I'm more centered on what is going to be the emotional toll, the life toll. The loss of life is sad and is significant. But that mental and emotional trauma will endure. The material loss is great. I have a cousin who has a friend, or I should say had a friend. The family bought and built a home, and the tornado came, just decimated the house, killed the mother, the father, 2 children, and the mother-in-law, and one child, 11-year-old, survived. I think about that little child, and I pray for all of them, but I think about that child. I've been thinking about that child for several days now. The trauma that little one, we'll live with. And how do we ensure, this prayer is going up, that child has the support sooner rather than later to find a way forward. That's a lot of loss. Yeah. Coupled with that, out of nowhere, that fear that will now abound.
Yeah.
And of course, this is all tied to global warming, right? We don't want to believe, some of us don't want to believe the science.
Yeah.
But the global warming allowed for those conditions, the gases and the precipitation that formed in those clouds.
Yeah. I heard one woman say that there, when some of the houses of worship were destroyed, how much it affected her.
Mm.
The places where we worship were just, the churches were just flattened. So it is a traumatic on many, many areas and levels. The level of community, the level of family, and the level of worship.
Oh, absolutely. But we're now 22 months into COVID or so, or maybe 23. Yeah. I don't even know anymore. 2021, I don't know. And I heard very early on, less so in more recent months. The constant refrain seemed to be, what is God saying to us? What is God trying to tell us? And I think about COVID and how COVID has endured. And now here in America, we are now, nearing, I think, 850,000 lives lost. And if you remember, at the very onset of this disease, when, we identified what it was, I'm going back, it's been here since at least November, December of last year. But when it really began ramping up and, now we had a name for it. In March of last year, they were saying maybe 200,000 people. And we're now on our way to 1 million, essentially. I can't help but think that when you take COVID and how it's played out, the people most disproportionately impacted, individuals and families, communities of color, very often individuals, families, and communities where the income levels are lower. And I mean, not that that is an absolute, but disproportionately so. And I think about those who've lost lives, and then I also think about those who've lost jobs, lost their livelihood. I think about, the where we are with respect to policing and what happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, right? Because that was, according to the defendants, they were trying to, do a civilian arrest, so their form of policing. So I think about that. And, race and racism attends both COVID and the social determinants of health and the fallout of COVID and the police killings and excessive use of force. I think about the tornado and then just so many other issues that presented, the increase, the surge in crime across the nation.
Yes.
And I can't help but think that the one thread in all of this is how are we showing up for each other, right? With COVID, how do we show up for each other in the thick of that, in those early months? And now it seems like it's surging again. Vaccines. What does that say about how we show up for each other? The killings of Black people. Who's showing up and who's not? Right, and I guess where I'm going, the tornado and global warming, and those who don't want to believe. And what does it say about how they're showing up? My point in all of this is, if we're searching for meaning, what the meaning of all of this is that God is trying to get us to center on the one thing that is at the core of his message to all of us, to love and love on one another, to be good to one another, our fellow brethren and sisters. And in each of these examples that I provided, where's the love?
Yeah.
Where's the love in the killing? Where's the love in not wearing a mask? Where is the love in knowing at this particular juncture that there's some efficacy to this vaccine? But you're not going to do it, and so we all keep getting sick and people keep dying. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
People may feel differently. Where's the love in not acknowledging global warming and the devastation it's having? Where's the love in a society that sees what happened to persons of color disproportionately impacted by COVID, but yet fails to raise the minimum wage to ensure people have the sufficient wages and income to provide for themselves and to save for a rainy day? Where's the love? And so maybe we just got to keep going through all of this because we still haven't shown and given to each other the love that God desires we give one to another. I don't know. That's my little take. I don't know.
That is a excellent soliloquy, if I can pronounce that word, but I really mean that in an excellent point of view. And not to mention the crimes that's recently happening in the subways, which is becoming a constant now.
So I run a nonprofit based in New York City. We determined to go back into the office 2 days a week in early November. The staff on board said they were not concerned about the subways and COVID. They were concerned more about the subways and crime.
Yeah.
So they weren't afraid to ride because of fear that there might be somebody on the subway who has COVID and they might contract it. No, they're concerned about the crimes. And that goes hand in hand with persons who are mentally challenged, not having in New York City, and for that matter, all around this country, the adequate resources to help care for and support people with mental health challenges. And so what often happens, persons with mental health challenges are looking for a place where they can go 24 hours a day. They may have challenges, but they want to be warmer, not necessarily warm, but warmer. They want to have a roof that shields them from the elements of the outside, of the outside. And so then where are they going to go 24 hours a day? They can go into the subways.
Yeah. Now, something historic took place today, as you know. And I know you worked under Mayor de Blasio. Have you transitioned to the new administration? Is that going to happen?
So I did not officially work for de Blasio, but like I've done with several other mayors and governors, U.S. senators, I've worked on issues that have connected me with the various administrations, attorney generals, the same. And so for de Blasio, I co-chaired his transition back in 2013. And then I worked with him and with his organization on a number of initiatives, ending solitary confinement in the New York City jails, policing reform to address racism in the NYPD, to build out a plan that they're beginning to implement. And the Eric Adams administration will have to continue the implementation because it's a state mandate. I designed the full-day universal pre-kindergarten and then helped to build that out. So, various things I've done along the way, childcare parity for workers in community-based organizations to be paid the same as DOE teachers, all of whom providing early childhood universal pre-kindergarten. So I've worked from the outside to try to help affect change on the inside. And my aim is to do the same with our incoming Mayor-elect Adams, to provide as much support and assistance and help wherever, however I possibly can, but to do it from the outside.
And his recent appointment, Nassau County Chief of Detectives, Kenchent Sewell, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, as the first, not just Black female, but the first female to be the commissioner of the NYPD.
I think I think it's fabulous. I think it's exciting. You know, it's a tall order. And, you know, like any woman can do it as well as any man can do it. So I think, you know, I'm excited about this, this signaling, like, you know, like some significant change just in terms of how we look at women in law enforcement. And I think that's a great thing. I think, you know, we'll see what all of this means. It's a, you know, it's a major undertaking and would be for any man. But you know, there's some changes that he wants to see happening, and I think we're going to see on the whole some significant change and departure, perhaps, from what's been in place over the last 8 years. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that's great. Now,
and we just don't pray, because how that goes affects how we go. Right?
No question about that. So I've heard you talk some about these things global, but how important for you personally is activism? And the reason why I asked that question is because there's still a thinking out there that churches should not be involved, that the only thing we're confined to is Sunday morning worship. And activism is a part of ministry. So how important is that to you?
So I think about it this way. For the Christian and the Christian church to serve pursuant to the example of Christ requires that you be an activist. Jesus Christ was an activist.
Yes.
Jesus Christ was not sitting up in the temple alone. And you know, he was out in the streets doing the work, feeding the poor, healing the sick. He was doing the work in the street, not just in the temple. And so that was activism in nature. You know, like that was like Jesus, the revolutionary.
Yes.
Calling out the systems and the structures, and you know, expressing a zero tolerance for that which, you know, was in contradiction, you know, complete contradiction to the word of God. And so I think churches, Christian churches, if they are to follow the teachings of Christ, and especially as on matters concerning the marginalization and oppression of people of color, then they need to be activists. It's not enough to declare yourself not to be racist. You've got to be an anti-racist and actively engaged in that work. And frankly, that's not just for white people. Black people have to be anti-racist activists. So that's what I think about the church and activism. You aren't doing the work if you aren't speaking truth to power. You're not doing the work. My
guest tonight, the Reverend Doctor, and I'm proud to say that the Reverend Doctor, but not Reverend Doctor, Dr. Jennifer Jones Austin.
Look. There's more to that. No.
Yeah, I get that. I just want to say our guests for the next couple of weeks, brothers and sisters, next Wednesday on Insight, we will have Bishop Philip Elliott, the pastor of the Antioch Baptist Church in Hempstead. He will be our guest, and certainly we're looking forward to having him to be on this show for the very first time. Looking forward to knowing him for over 35 years. Looking forward to having him. And so then following him on the 29th, we won't have Insight, but then on the 5th, I think of January, we will be with Nikki Lucas. Now, we already talked about your degree, but now here's my copy of the original, or the first version of God in the Ghetto. Now, the revised edition is that, what was the undertaking like that for you personally to be able to do that in the now? Because as you're going to be talking, we're going to put pictures up. Well, that's the book that first came out, and then of course the revised edition, God in the Ghetto, a prophetic word revisited. I love the way that was really put. And as you're going to be speaking, we're going to be putting pictures up of your dad, of him baptizing Reverend Sharpton and things of that nature. But what made that journey so impactful for you?
So let me first say, you know, because you've talked to me about this before, and I was blessed to be able to speak at Bethlehem Nation. I had written a book, considered Pure Joy.
Yes.
And the book chronicling my journey with cancer and just the power of faith and how it really helped me to grab hold of my journey and be a witness. And then, and then to come out being a witness for Christ and how he brought me through. Just a tremendous journey. And I'm thankful that I was able to write the book. So I knew something about book writing and something about editing. A few years ago, I, had serving as the leader of the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies. I began working with a lot of faith leaders. And you and I have engaged on some of the work, census and other issues concerning the community. And what I realized was that my faith roots, being deeply rooted in like a kind of like social justice, theo-social justice or social justice theology, like background, had me questioning, where is the Black church on issues of social justice? Not just doing charity work, but doing like real justice advocacy activist work. Again, saying no to the lies, vetoing the untruths. Where was the church? And I began appreciating that people were saying they've got so much going on, but they could not attend to both activism and like the work of the church. I started thinking, something's got to be said about this.
Yeah.
Because they may not really, some ministers, and you're an exception, may not really understand that this is not like something that you only, like activism is not something you should be doing once you've taken care of everything else. It is like at the core of what you should be doing, right? Because that's part of preaching the word. You can't be a Christian. You can't be a faith leader and not be speaking not just about charitable endeavors, but about justice endeavors.
Yeah.
I heard a pastor say just recently, we have to begin to ask ourselves as a Christian community, is it immoral that we center only on charity work?
Mm.
That's a powerful question. So I started thinking about that and I was like, let me go read what Daddy said about this.
Yes.
And so I picked up God in the Ghetto. And as I read and read, this book published first in 1979, I thought to myself, oh, no. We need to put this back out in circulation because it is a book that in plain speak deconstructs the system of racism, capitalism, and militarism, all working in concert to continually oppress people of color. Dad wrote in 1979 about critical race theory before critical race theory was even termed such. What he does in God in the Ghetto is helps you to appreciate that racism is not a one-on-one relationship, has never been, but rather racism, is what helped to succeed and birth this generation. What he helps you to do in this book, and this is what I love so much about it, he helps us to appreciate that racism is not an end in and of itself. We talk about ending racism as though that's the big thing we've got to do. What he does is he helps you appreciate is racism is a tool in the system of oppression and supremacy. Racism is the tool that is used to uphold white supremacy, and white supremacy benefiting the most from capitalism. What he helps you to understand, he talks about the system being the system of racism, capitalism, and militarism, all working in concert to continually oppress people of color. What he helps you to understand is racism and militarism are the tools, but the main objective, the main aim, is to keep this capitalist structure and have it be one where there are certain people on top and certain people who never get ahead. Well, the way that you justify such a structure is by justifying racism. And so as I read all of this, I was like, wait a minute. More people need to lean in on this, because what he does is he breaks it down, what it looks like. He breaks down. It's titled God in the Ghetto. He helps you appreciate the ghetto is not just a physical place as it concerns Black people.
Absolutely.
For the white person, the white supremacist thinking person, the ghetto is wherever the Black person is. And it's not just physical. It's a mindset. It is a culture. It is a set of conditions that the white community places upon people who are Black, regardless of wherever they live, and seeks to then deprive Black people of basic goods and services. And then to suggest that it's because they are Black that they haven't figured out how to acquire them. It's to suggest that they are abhorrent, heathen, right? To then feed the narrative. It's not by mistake that the physical ghetto is deprived of the basic resources, as we saw with COVID. And that's because you then get to say, see, look, we keep trying to help them take care of yourselves or help them, and they don't get anywhere. So I put the book out because I was like, okay, people need to understand this. Daddy used to say, gain knowledge, gain power. Gain knowledge, gain power. If you don't understand the system that you're up against, you can't do anything about it. You can't fight the enemy that if you don't understand how the enemy functions. So what he sought to do, and what I thought was a good thing to do, was to put it out there and put it back out there, so people would have a really solid understanding of this system and how it functions, and then find the courage and the strength to act against it.
You know, my director of Christian education, our director of Christian education, Sister Ollie McPherson, there's this picture I found, and we wanted to know whether it was copyrighted, but it's not. And it's about these books going up like stairs. And as at the top of the stairs, it forms a fist: gain knowledge, gain power. And we're going to try to make that as one of the banners in our church, because, you know, reading is still very, very important to us to be able to know and all things. But I do also want to say something else as it relates to the system. And I've experienced this, and I mean, when I experienced this, I mean in the last 3 years. The system of racism is so profound in America that, and I say this with respect to all cultures, that people who are in our color like us, from India, possibly Pakistan, work in stores. When they wait on white people, they go right away. But it's if they act as if we are invisible. So that system can also carry over to other people of color from another country coming to this country.
Well, twofold. I mean, one of the things that we've seen, and I'm just going to put it out here, and I may get challenged on this. You know, we've seen some of that when people come immigrate to this country, even from African countries or even Caribbean countries.
Yes.
This notion that if you are like, sometimes you have Caribbean Americans, people from the African continent, who want to make it clear they're not Black Americans.
Yes.
Right? We're like, that stuff that, you know, they get into, and that's not us. I'm just calling it. There's a desire to distinguish. What I believe is that you also have, I guess it's a form of internalized racism, and people looking at other persons of color and looking at Black persons and saying, I'm not that, or like they don't deserve, because they are Black. And our skin color or our skin colors, make it okay for us to be seen as less than. And so then other cultures will adopt that. I was at an event in Florida earlier today speaking on the book, The Ghetto Prophetic Word Revisited. I was at the National Council of Black Churches, the Council of Black Churches. And I shared that, like racism is much like water. Water will creep in to different places and spaces and affect the landscape of those spaces. Or even if you have water in your home, when it starts big flood and it starts creeping, it has an impact, a detrimental impact on whatever surfaces it touches. And if it sits there too long undisturbed, that's what racism is like. Yeah. Racism creeps. For the Pakistani, as you just said, it just creeps and creeps and creeps, and it finds those spaces. And then it transforms the landscape.
Wow. Right. Now, your involvement in the National Action Network. I mean, you and Reverend Sharpton, Dr. Freddie Haynes were, of course, marching together and things that took place. At which state was that again?
We were down in Texas.
We went down in Texas, exactly. And you were all doing that, and you're very much involved with the National Action Network. And how has that, and are you still on Open Line?
I am. Every Sunday morning at 8 a.m.
Every Sunday morning at 8 a.m., brothers and sisters, please tune in at WBLS. And there I was there, my wife and I were there that night to celebrate. And that's Lorne Michaels, of course, being presented something for the creative Saturday Night Live.
I was playing Vanna that night.
Yeah, I see that. Vanna White, you were doing that. So how has that been? That has been as it relates to being involved in the National Action Network, which I am a member, and I really don't get to get there every Saturday like I would like to. But how has that been for you?
I've grown so much personally. Let me just begin there. Because of the mentorship, the big brother relationship that I share with Al Sharpton. I was just elected vice chair of the board of the National Action Network. As Reverend Sharpton is quick to say, the first vice chair. The board, the National Action Network in its 30 years has never had a vice chair. And the first female to hold any of the board leadership positions, at this level. And so that's kind of cool, kind of exciting, kind of daunting. And I'm going to be working hand in hand with Reverend Richardson. This organization is now 30 years old. Yes. And what has been created in the National Action Network is, today, one of the most, if not the most, dependable civil rights organizations, like certain to be there when injustice raises its ugly head, to be willing to step up, as I just keep on saying throughout this conversation with you, to veto an untruth, to say no to a lie. This organization, I think is, one could rightfully assert, argue, has become like the preeminent Black-led civil rights organization, because it is speaking truth and not backing down. And so I'm humbled to be able to be at the table as we center on the issues of today, whether they be voting, gun control, looking at COVID and vaccine access, to looking at all of these other social determinants of health, looking at Black economy. I'm honored to be at the table having these critical conversations with Reverend Al Sharpton, persons like you, and we need to do more together. And my fervent hope is that my background in policy and legislation and understanding politics and systems and frankly community and the dire straits that communities are grappling with, Black and brown communities on a daily basis, that I can bring all that to the table and help us not only continue to advance in an activist way, but then also center on some of these core structurally racist issues that we need to deal head on. So did I tell you? I don't know if I've told you. And you got, look, I'm going to be your first guest to come back for a third time. And I'm going to tell you why right now. I'm just going to invite myself. So, you may know that I'm chairing the New York City Racial Justice Commission.
Yes, I do.
And it's the first of its kind in the nation, centering on structural racist laws and systems within government, with the aim of dismantling those systems and their structures, of those structures and systems, to begin to advance true racial equity. Well, the commission's been in place since March, and come December 27th, we will be finalizing ballot measures, ballot questions to appear on the November 8th, 2022 New York City ballot. Measures that center on dismantling structural racism here in New York City. We're putting forth ballot measures that first and foremost establish what we call a preamble, essentially, like a statement about racism in New York City and the importance of the city, especially the government, assuming an anti-racist posture. And a preamble that speaks to what every New Yorker should feel that its government is working to provide that individual and that family. Going to have the establishment of an Office of Racial Equity that requires it to work with all city agencies and boards to biennially, every 2 years, put forth a racial equity plan for engaging in anti-marginalization, making sure that we reduce like the impact of justice involvement for persons of color, centering on how do we keep people of color from being justice involved in the first place? How do we essentially strengthen communities with economic development and make sure they have their fair share? Wealth building, income and wages, centering on occupation and wage segregation and how Black women in particular and brown women too are marginalized by being paid lower wages, often for doing the same work. So it's like we're going to center on that in the Office of Racial Equity and hold government accountable. There'll be a commission made up of the people of the City of New York who have been marginalized and oppressed, for them to hold the government accountable. Then one of the last things we're going to focus on that I'm really excited about is a true cost of living for New York City. So every year, the city announces what the poverty measures using the federal poverty level say to us. What percentage of New Yorkers are living in poverty? The federal poverty level is dated and antiquated, hugely outdated. It says that a family of 4 living anywhere in this country, 2 adults, working adults, and 2 children, even that alone is in some ways dated and antiquated, because the majority of households, especially for persons of color, are not 2 working adults. Just that is what it is. But what it says, the federal poverty level, is that for a family of 4 living anywhere in this country, New York City or Wichita, Kansas, if that family has more than $26,500 coming through the door, they're technically not poor.
Yeah, isn't that something?
So if you use that as your poverty measure in a city like New York, there's great many people making more than $26,500 in a family of four. But in the Bronx, as an example, a mother of two, three in the house, a mother and two young children, needs $95,000 to pay all her bills.
Hmm.
But the federal government says she only needs, as a family of three, $21,800 not to be poor. So what we're putting in place is a true cost of living that calculates what it costs with respect to housing, food, transportation, childcare, incidental health costs, and the like for families to survive and thrive in New York City. And once you have that true cost of living, it's a game changer. Because now, you can advocate for yourself. How's an employer going to give you or pay you in income less than what is needed to survive? It's a game changer.
When you talked about that structure,
So I got to come back and talk about that as we get closer to voting.
Yeah, I just want everyone to know officially that Dr. Jennifer Jones-Austin invited herself back to Insight, to which I will not refuse. I just wanted to put that out there. When you talked about structural racism, that would also include prison reform in some way, which is, of course, the extension of slavery in this country.
Right, absolutely. The challenge that we have.
It's 9 o'clock.
Don't worry about that. That's just my computer talking.
Okay. The challenge that we have is that the prison system is not controlled by the city. So we couldn't go in and change the charter with respect to the prison system. But what we do make is recommendations for state action on these issues. And let me just pause and say to you that, and I'm just getting comfortable. That was some of the frustration, like I think about some of the lessons learned through this process. And one of the most frustrating lessons was to see how the system actually props up the system.
Mm.
How we would say, oh, a certain thing needs to be changed. And we'd hear, well, you can't do that because you don't have the power to do it. Well, we need to change who's got the power. Yeah, but then that's changing the system in the way it's been. Like the system reinforces the system. So if the law says I don't have the power, then you trying to tell me I don't have the power. But we got to change that. You get what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. Yes, absolutely.
I've learned between the re-release of God in the Ghetto and all that's transpired over the last 20 plus months, and then serving on this commission, one of the things that I've learned a lot, but one of the things that I've learned is racism as a tool. Well, let me back up and say it this way. I was asked earlier today, why, after all these years, are we still grappling with racism?
Yeah.
Why, after, legislation of various types, Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, right, Fair Housing Act, why are we still grappling with racism?
And Frederick Douglass asked that question too. And
the reason, right, but the answer's simple. Because it works. Racism works, right? Racism is the most effective tool in continually ensuring a capitalist society where some people have and some people don't. And that is based disproportionately and in the main along color lines. That's why we still got that racism. And when you understand that it's structural, then you realize that policies and legislation are responses to it, but they don't root it out. You have to root it out. It's like cancer. You have to cut it out. You can't just pretend it's going to go away, or even like sometimes the treatment, right, for cancer is not what it should be. That's what law and legislation and policies are essentially like trying to fix the problem, but not at its root, rather as it presents. So until we do the structural racism, the undoing of that, we don't get anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, your family, of course, we have pictures of you, your husband, and your children, and how has your family been impacted your life and ministry? And this is your son and your daughter, beautiful, handsome, beautiful.
Thank you.
And I didn't put your other pictures up there, which of course with your wide eyes, I really think is really humorous and everything like that. You and your husband, and certainly you have been such a fan. And how has family life impact your life and the ministry that you do in a real way? And then of course your father there on the Bethany pulpit.
Oh, I'm just pausing and taking that one in right now. I miss him up there.
Yeah.
I've been so blessed. I've been so immensely blessed. Beautiful parents who loved and poured into me and, continue to. I mean, my dad lives on in me. And then earlier today, I was, having a conversation about my husband and how I was blessed and have been blessed and continue to be blessed with a husband who has always sought to provide for his family and to lift me up and get and value my voice. I met him when I was in college, and then we both went to grad school. I went to law school and he went to business school. And it was in my second year of law school, while searching for a law review note topic, that I happened upon a case of parricide, a case where a young man, 15-year-old, killed his father and was tried and convicted. And at sentencing, the judge determined that the jury didn't quite understand the evidence, because what had been presented was more than ample evidence that this young man had endured years and years of physical and emotional abuse at the hands of his father. So much that he always lived in a constant state of fear of being killed. So essentially what the judge found was that the young man had endured post-traumatic stress syndrome, which caused him to always believe, post-traumatic stress disorder, which caused him to always feel that he was at risk of being killed by his father.
Wow.
When I read that case, it opened up a whole new world to me. I began to understand a little bit more about how some children are so brutally, beaten or traumatized at the hands of their parents. Doesn't mean that the parents are bad people. Very often their parents are themselves troubled.
Yeah. Wow.
Stressors and other things. And that opened up the world of helping me to understand that, I need to lean in and understand more about the experiences of children who endure they have to go through such pain. All of that to say that I started leaning in and I just couldn't stop. So much so that when it came time in the fall of my third year of law school to begin looking for a corporate attorney position, and I started down that course, that path, one day I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, weeping, because I said, God has work for me to do. So I called up this guy I was dating, and I said to him, I believe God wants me to work on behalf of his children, his vulnerable children, the ones made vulnerable by the system. And I said, and I know we talked about me going to law school and being a corporate lawyer, and you're going to be this business guy. But I think I'm not supposed to be that corporate lawyer. The Lord has worked for me to do. And this guy said back to me, I'll never forget. I was sitting on that bed. And I mean, I can see it right now, in part because I live in the house that I grew up in. And I can visualize it. And he said, well, then you need to go and you need to do that. And I remember thinking, this guy is amazing. And he continued, because if you don't, you're going to be miserable. And then I was like, oh my God, he's awesome. He sees me, right? He loves me. And then he said, and if you're miserable, I'm going to be miserable. And I don't intend to live a miserable life. So that was the guy that I then married about 16 months later. And that's been who he is. Like he is consistent. That's who he was in 1992. And that's who he is in 2022. Just sees the work that I have been blessed to do as the work that God has for me. And so he just helps me to live into it. It's been phenomenal. The kids the same. And one of the things I'm excited about is, just as my parents modeled for me, living into your purpose, and encouraged us to do so. We're very fortunate we get to do the same with our children. Not everybody is fortunate in this regard, but we are, and we help them to appreciate the blessing of it. So I've got a 24-year-old daughter who is working for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, wow. Legal and Education Defense Fund, wow. and doing the work. I mean, like, just is so happy to be there and centering on the issues of the day, the law, the legal cases of the moment, and sharpening her mind to do this work. And then I've got a little guy, not so little, but he's, he's in college and excelling academically and excelling on the baseball field. He aspires to, be a Renaissance man. Told me he's going to be the next Paul Robeson. He's going to do some baseball and he's going to do business. And since he's been on campus out in California, he's been speaking at demonstrations centering on college rape.
Wow.
And the wrongs of it. So, God has been good.
He's awesome. a Renaissance young man. That's what you're saying. He's a Renaissance young man.
That's what he said. You're right. That's what he said. God has been awesome.
Now, these last three questions. Now, I know you well read. What books have you read that you would recommend to this audience? Books that inspired you?
So the first book, let me see if I have it for you.
She's sitting in her library, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, and that's just a partial. I'm sure that library is even more extensive than that.
It is.
Of course it is.
It indeed is. So there are a couple of books that I want to tell you about, and I'm coming right back to you. I'm looking for one of them, which is my favorite book. But I guess I maybe have it. Maybe I let somebody borrow. Oh, here we go. These are three of my favorite books. Now, what I'll tell you, I'm reading right now a book titled Becoming Brave. And it's a book about becoming a brave anti-racist in the spirit of Esther. So I'll tell you about that when we meet up again. Three books that I love. So let me first say, and this is not a pitch per se, but I will tell you that my book, Consider Pure Joy, I think is tremendous to center on.
Absolutely, yes.
Life's challenges and how to live through them with faith, seeing what God is doing in you. when I had cancer, someone gave me this book, The Barbarian Way, by Erwin Raphael McManus. It's a very short book and an extremely short read. It's phenomenal. Now, let me tell you why I like this book. I like this book because in this book, Mr. McManus talks about how Christians actually get Christianity wrong. He talks about how we believe that if we are Christians, once we accept Jesus Christ, we believe that our lives should be minimized with respect to suffering. And what he helps you to understand is Christ suffered. So to suffer is to be like Christ. It's tremendous. It just helps you understand what's suffering, what's the value in suffering. Then there's this book. If you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Come on, get up and out of the boat.
Yeah.
Right? You can't, if you want to live a certain life, you can't be sitting back and just waiting for it to happen. And it's all about how you have to trust and have faith and believe. If you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat.
You get out of the boat.
And then this book I love, Nothing to Prove. Why We Can Stop Trying So Hard. Do we have a minute? Can I quickly tell you a story about this book?
Go right ahead.
Oh, it's so powerful. So, about 4 or 5 years ago, I gave a speech at Columbia University. And I felt like I wasn't heard. I was trying to talk about this structural system and how you've got to unpack it and understand structural racism. And maybe I was trying to talk about this too soon. And people were asking me questions that helped me to appreciate. They were centering on kind of like the throwaways, but not the real guttural work that needs to be done. I walked out and I was despondent. I was I just felt so low. And I started thinking what am I doing? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And why is it not connected? And out of nowhere, my mother called me up and said to me, it was a Thursday afternoon. And she said, I just want you to know you are enough. And I was like, okay, wow, well, thank you, Mom. Next day, I met a friend for lunch. And when I sat down at the table, and I never met this, he's a friend now, but he wasn't a friend then. He was just somebody in the field that people kept saying we should meet. So I met him for lunch. When I sat down, I came and he was already there, and I sat down at the table. He had this book waiting there for me, Nothing to Prove. And when I opened it up, it read, he had written, Dear Jennifer, thank you for being a sister in spirit, strength, and synergy. Keep pressing and keep blessing, but remember always, you are enough. So this was the day after I got the call from my mother. That Sunday, I hopped on Staten Island Ferry with my girlfriend from high school, my best friend from high school. We got some muffins and we got some tea. And we hopped on the ferry and rode the ferry to Staten Island, and then we rode the ferry back. It's like a really cheap date. It was a lot of fun. So she and I were on the ferry. And when we first got on, she gave me a card. I said, do you want me to open it right now? She said, no, you don't have to open it now, but open it in a few days. I said, oh, or whenever, open it when you get home. So we talked, then we left each other. I came home, spent the rest of the afternoon doing whatever I do on a Sunday afternoon. Monday came, went to work. Tuesday came, and I was going to work and decided I was going to use a different pocketbook. So I had to enter the contents of the pocketbook I'd been carrying for a few days into and put them in the other pocketbook. When I did, the card appeared. I'd never opened the card. When I opened up the card, 2 days later, so remember, Thursday, Mom says you are enough. Friday, get a book, you are enough. Open up the card, and it reads, if nobody else tells you, you are enough.
That's beautiful. Now,
And this book speaks to it.
Accelerating to these last two, how important is mentoring and being mentored?
So I pause on that one. I have mentors in my life, but I don't have formal mentor relationships. I like to think I mentor many people, but I don't have formal structured mentor relationships. And I think that I personally think that that's a better model. It's very hard, especially these days, to find somebody to mentor you, like to be like, to have standing meetings, to be at your beck and call. And because unless you were in the same profession and want to do exactly what that mentor did, you need diverse experiences to help inform you as you mature in your work. I also think people can be mentored at any age. I am constantly being mentored today. And I'm 53 and I've been working for, nearly 30 years. So what I would say to you is that I don't know if I call them mentors. I guess I call them mentors, people on whom I can call. They're like my kitchen cabinet to get advice, to get varied perspectives, to be understood, to help me figure out how to be best understood. So I think these networking and these relationships where you can be vulnerable, in your work, your profession, your person, I think those are good. But don't be anxious if you don't have a formal, structured mentoring.
Okay. So, considering that growing up in the African-American church, growing up listening and singing the hymns and spirituals and gospel music. Now, this is going to be a good question because I've seen your appreciation for music. So what other genres of music do you listen to?
I love jazz. I love soulful jazz. Occasionally, I will be enraptured with a classical piece.
Yeah.
I mean, just like the beauty and both the complexity and simplicity all in one, very often of classical music. I love me some R&B. And I love gospel. But I will tell you, it's the hymns that hold me down when life gets tough.
Yeah. I want to thank you. Now, before we come to a close, well, when we do come to a close, you're going to hear a music, a song that is 1 minute and 38 seconds, written by Hugh Masekela, the late Hugh Masekela from South Africa, called Koshana, which means God's gift. Koshana, which means God's gift. Kanisha, that's what it is. I'm sorry. Kanisha, which is God's gift, which means you have been God's gift to us, sharing, being transparent, and a gifting to us personally. So I want to say that to you. and how I also want to say that in the year 2025, we're planning on doing an Insight conference, to which we will be inviting you. It's going to be like 3 days, cover afternoon, evening session, panel discussions on the various things that many of the guests have talked about with emphasis. So that's why somebody would ask me why wait so long, because we're still in the development stages of that before we can get that right.
I love it.
So I want to say that to you, and I want to say how much we appreciate you and your work, your family, and the things that you have done over the course of the years and still doing. I'm still trying to work on, and Marshall, Reverend Sharpton's assistant, Reverend Marshall, has, I was trying to get Joy Reid, Rachel Maddow, Nicole Wallace, but he says that they won't do those kind of things because they're tied to contractual things. I'm trying to get Eliasia Shabazz, and because certainly experiencing the recent death of her sister, I'm still going to try to get them all if I can. I'll try to find a way to work around it.
And I can make some inquiries for you.
Okay. And I want you to give closing remarks of words of inspiration, encouragement, and then close us out in a word of prayer, if you will.
So first, let me just thank you for allowing me to be with you again this evening. As you can see, I enjoy my time with you. I just value these moments and that you provide them to so many, just to people to bring their whole selves into the space and to share in ways that I hope encourage others to find their voices and to feel okay to share their truths. What I am hoping for people, especially in these times, we're in the midst of the holidays, which can be difficult for people for understandable reasons. To just, like whether it's holidays or not, continually center on the appreciation that we are all here because we have purpose. There's not one of us that does not have purpose. God has placed each and every one of us here to live and to do a certain thing. And some of us get to learn what that is sooner rather than later. Some of us, it takes a while. Some of us will never know. But what I can encourage you to do is to show up in the world.
Yes.
Show up in the way that Jesus, the revolutionary, taught. And I guarantee you, you'll soon be finding your purpose. So just be encouraged to do what the Lord desires, to show up and live in the way that Jesus taught. You'll be all right. Life is going to be good. Sometimes it's going to suffer, but you're going to be all right.
You're going to be all right.
You'll be all right. So let's go to God in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening of fellowship and friendship and of sharing. Dear Lord, I pray that the time that we've had together, that we've inspired and encouraged each other, but we've also inspired and encouraged those who've listened in. I pray that the conversation, the words, how we talked with one another, encourages others to be more free and forthcoming in sharing of themselves, seeing the value and the worth in their experiences, whatever they may be, as a way to inform and bless and enrich other people who are on their journeys and are in need of a word. Dear Lord, I thank you for Reverend Dr. Camp, for all that he does at Bethlehem Nation, and for Insight, for this platform and the many people that it reaches and blesses. Dear Lord, be with us as we sleep tonight and as we rise in the morning, and equip us to do the work that you've called and purposed us to do. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And I offer congratulations to her cousin, who's become a friend of mine, Dr. Michael Clayton Harris, of course, who acts of faith, but has been called to a church as well. And certainly my appreciation for him. We've seen each other in person.
His father's church.
His father's church. That's right.
Years before.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Dr. Michael Neely Harris. That's right. So I want to offer my congratulations to Dr. Michael Clayton Harris, who has one of the great sense of humor and a great mind when it talks to everything sports and how he kind of connects it together in a theological way. So I want to congratulations to him, and of course to his adoring mother and a friend of mine personally, Miss Sylvia Harris, who is such a gracious lady, of course, your aunt. So as we sign off, brothers and sisters, we'll see you next week when Dr. Bishop Philip Elliott from the Antioch Baptist Church in Hempstead will be our guest, and we will leave you with this song by Hugh Masekela, literally called Roshana, meaning God, meaning listed right here, Roshana, meaning God's gift. God bless you all. See you next week.